An introduction to the book of Exodus. Who? Imagine yourself as the editor of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, pulling together a document from a variety of different sources during the period of Israel's exile in Babylon. What is it that you're trying to say? What can be included and what can be left out? As we discussed when we looked at Genesis, the original author of Exodus is probably impossible to locate. Tradition says Moses wrote the book, but both the estimated date of the sources and the competing voices within the text make this highly unlikely. What we appear to have is a text brought into being by an editor, one who's interwoven a number of source materials with a degree of complexity and skill, whilst at the same time keeping in some inconsistencies that arise from combining sources which each have their own agendas. It's worth pointing out that these inconsistencies don't need to detract from the text, but actually create a sort of a dialectic tension within it from which we, the reader, can draw our own synthesis. When? Location-wise, Exodus begins where Genesis ended, in Egypt. However, whereas the first book of the Bible leaves the family of Jacob in a foreign land, Exodus starts with the news that that family has now become a nation. Fruitful and prolific, it says. And this is an early indication of the subject matter of the book. Genesis began with the formation of the whole world. Exodus begins with another formation, the formation, albeit in captivity, of a nation. Let's go back to our exiled editor in Babylon. Clearly, what it means to be a nation would be important to him, especially if we consider that those things which had been taken for granted have now disappeared. Unifying factors like the monarchy or the temple in Jerusalem, they've gone. And so the editor wants to find material which performs the roles which the king and the religion used to perform prior to the exile. Some parts of the book of Exodus are very old. There are 2 significant differences between the laws in Exodus and the laws in Deuteronomy, which we'll look at a bit later. But the differences are worth pointing out at this point. Exodus, unlike Deuteronomy, has no laws for the installation of a king in Israel. Another difference is that in Exodus 20, the people are told that they can make sacrifices to God wherever they build an altar. This is contradicted in Deuteronomy when it's stated that only one altar in a central location should be used for sacrifices. So these 2 differences suggest that the sources used in Exodus are earlier than those used in Deuteronomy. It places them prior to the centralizing of the religion in Israel, which took place in the 7th century BC, and perhaps even places some of the material in the book prior to the monarchy in the 10th century BC. Why? The editor of the Pentateuch sources all of this old material in order to answer the questions, who are we and what is it that binds us together? In the story of the Exodus, Israel finds something that unites the nation. In the person of Moses, Israel finds a hero who rescued them from captivity in Egypt. In the laws that God gives to Moses on Mount Sinai, Israel finds a set of rules that will keep them distinct from the Babylonians amongst whom they're now living. So Exodus tells the Israelites who they are, but it also tells them who God is, and this is perhaps our way into the book today. God, we're told, saw the suffering of the people and acted, not because Israel deserved it, but because God is gracious. God took on the might of Pharaoh, perceived by the Egyptians as a deity, and God won. So whilst there's grace in God, in the rescue, there's also genuine power in God. Finally, God is the source of the law. There's an authority which is above both humankind and nature, to whom people may appeal. In other ancient Near Eastern literature, the laws were the work of the king, and so they appealed to the king's authority. The Israelite laws are not like that. They appeal to God's authority. So in the book of Exodus, the characters of both God and of Israel are defined.